I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
I'm speaking with Mike today. Mike, how are you, buddy?
Good.
You've had a crazy situation going on there. Tell me from the beginning how this started and then take me through all the events that have gone on.
Okay, about 3 years ago, one night when my dogs were barking, I live up on a hillside out of town about 8 miles, and I went outside and heard, it sounded like a bear or two bears fighting, but what struck me odd was it didn't sound entirely like a bear, and it just stopped all at once, and I thought if two bears were fighting, they would have kept on growling at each other a little bit, but it just stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then later, I was listening to an interview on YouTube, and somebody was saying that they've heard of these Bigfoots sometimes throwing temper tantrums. Well, I still brushed it off at a bear. The next thing that happened is one night I shot a coyote up here, and I was going to go up there in the morning and see where it was, and I went up there to where it was, and there was a big flattened place in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a little bit of coyote fur and a great big pile, not a pile, but a long line of poo, and it was huge. And I blew it off as a bear again. It was bigger around than a pop can and probably 18 inches long.
Definitely not bear.
Definitely not bear. Yeah. Now that, So the next thing that happened is I saw my dogs were barking again. I went out and shined a bright light around, and I saw one red eye about 130 yards up the hill. And it looked back away, and then about 10 seconds later, it looked back at me again. One red eye. It was just eye shine. It didn't light up or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, what in the world was that? My dogs quieted down, and about 2 weeks later, it got real weird because I went out. My dogs were barking again. I went out, shined a light in the same area, and I saw two white eyes and a red eye about 10 inches below the two white eyes. And I thought, I don't know what the heck you are, but if you stay out there and don't bother me, I won't bother you. And I thought it was getting really weird at that point. I never saw that again. And then about 6 months or a year later, one night I was sitting here about 2 o'clock in the morning, and a rather large rock hit my house with force. And I mean, it was a big crack, and I go, what in the heck? And I had got interested in investigating what had red eyes, and I was coming up with Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been interested in Bigfoot, but then I really started getting in it once I seen those red eyes. And I'd heard people say, bears can't throw rocks because they don't have thumbs, and so I figured that had to be a Bigfoot throwing a rock at my house. Well, I mentioned it to a neighbor or two, and, they laughed at me. So then one night I was out working a few hours after dark, which was real unusual for me. I was working on a gutter out back on my milking room, and I heard something say, hey, to my dogs. My dogs were barking at it, and this real loud hey. And it come out of an open field where nobody ever is. There's nothing out there at all. And it's like the spirit said to me, pay attention to that. And I walked out there and looked around, but I remembered it real well. Well, let me try and think what happened. What happened next? Actually, my girlfriend and I started going up behind Carson and looking for Bigfoot up in that area. And I was finding old tracks and lots of tree breaks and things. And that's where I found that inverted tree. And that was a real interesting find. And we come home from there, and one night we had the bedroom window open, and I heard something out back and down the creek past my chicken house and way up the other bank. And we heard this bark, 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 hoo, hoo, hoo. And I thought, what in the heck is that? That's not a chicken at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Not very
And,
likely.
we
no.
stay up really. No, we stay up pretty late, and I was going to take a gun and go out there with a light, and I decided, no, I might just be being baited. I better let this go. And a couple of weeks later, I walked past the bedroom window, just crawling in bed, and I heard 2 real fast, sharp knocks. Bang, bang, just that quick. And I thought that couldn't have been a person, because people will hit a tree with a baseball bat, they'll hit it whack, whack, and these were way close together. And we looked at each other and said, we've got a Bigfoot here. Well, I was out in the garden a few weeks later, and I was watering, and I heard whack, whack. And it sounded like it was real close to me. And then I felt this vibration in my chest. And that's when I figured the infrasound hit me, because, half a minute later, I stood up to water, and I couldn't remember what I was going to do next, where I was going to place the water hose. And I was just totally confused. And finally, I got the water going again, and I sat back down, and I got ready to do it again, and I'm still totally confused. And that really shocked me, and I realized that I'd been hit with infrasound. Well, since then, I've heard my dogs barking a number of times, and they will be barking, rah, 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 and then they'll go, rah, and act like they've been hit with a rock or something. And then when they start barking, it'll be kind of a whine, and kind of, like they're hurting. And I think this thing's been using infrasound on them. And one other night I went out, my dogs were barking, I shined a light around, and I caught a glimpse of eye shine just a little bit, once or twice, behind a couple of different trees. And then the last thing that I had one barking at my dog. It was just down the road, doing that at my dog a couple of times. And then I knew my dog was in danger, and I tried to get her to come back up towards the house.
Mm-hmm.
But my dog was barking, and I jumped out of bed and shined a flashlight out the window, and there that sucker was, right there in my pasture about 75 yards away. And it was wrestling with this juniper tree branch underneath it, trying to twist it and break it. And when I shined the light on that thing, it twisted its head down and back up to see me, and its eyes lighted up orange red, and it stomped off. And I thought, wow. I got back in bed and told my girlfriend, I said, I just saw a Bigfoot out here in the pasture. And I went down and measured it, and it's only about 7 foot.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize it come back out into the pasture that night and acted angry or ticked off at me or whatever, but it scraped its toenails, its claws, into the ground, and then it dug its toes in and ripped the hard soil and stuff back, and left me a really good print that I cast up. And the print's 15 inches, but this thing really had sharp claws on its toes. And that's kind of been what's happening. Before this, about 3 weeks before this, I have 3 weeks of taking my cell phone and putting it up on the window. I got a recording app that doesn't record the blank areas, the quiet times. And I'm having tree knocks up here. Sometimes I'm going to say 1 or 2 a minute, up to as high as 15 or 20 a minute. And sometimes I'll hear tree knocks in my recordings, sometimes limbs breaking, rocks being thrown at the house and hitting things, rocks hitting trees, hitting the trailer, hitting the house. And we had to go out and pick up all the rocks out of the driveway so we could, see the new rocks, anything big that something would have thrown. And since I talked to you about trying to how to get rid of it, I've been pouring my urine out there, and that seems to have helped some. We are going to put up some, I live off grid, so I don't have much 110, but I have a lot of 12 volt. So I'm going to try to get a motion light or some of these solar lights that will come on automatically. They have motion detector floodlights that will come on in your driveway when you come in.
Right.
So I'm going to put some of those out. And I got an air horn type thing that I'm going to start using on them when they come in.
Oh, very good.
I'm really, really worried about my dogs. I got 2 dogs. They're both big dogs. And they've been being hit with infrasound. And sometimes I in my recordings, I think I hear something walking in the gravel out in my driveway. And my dogs won't make any noise, or they'll just do a low growl at it. It makes me think that they're afraid of it. And last night I saw my dog, barking. And normally she goes down to the end of the driveway and barks at the gate. She was halfway down the driveway and barking, and then she come back and she got between the 2 vehicles and was looking down that way, barking at it and watching. And I've never seen this dog act scared like that, but she was scared. And she's a big dog. She's a Marama. He's a Great Pyrenees, and she's bigger than him. So, yeah, they're big, tough dogs. I've got bear and cougar up here too, but man.
Now, did you
Bigfoot,
say you're on the north side of town? Is that right?
I'm actually on the south east side of Goldendale.
Okay. The reason I was curious is, I don't know if you heard on a few shows I mentioned back in the mid-'90s, there were a couple older gentlemen, and I've told this a few times before, came to where I worked in Portland when I lived there in Vancouver, and they had been scouting their deer hunting area out. They took a Baja and they went cross-country through some gated roads. This was on the northwestern side of the town, and they found would have been a very young juvenile Sasquatch tracks running in that powdery soil that runs those roads. And I found bear tracks, photographed bear tracks in that area, but someone in a Forest Service uniform and truck went in there and they washed the prints away. Basically, these guys found miles of these tracks and they were gone. It was kind of weird that they would go in and do something like that, but the 2 men were very believable. And I have no doubt. I mean, we found the rag that they tied around the tree to mark where the prints were and everything. So there's definitely been a lot of activity in your area.
I know some people that live in the northwest corner of town out there, probably 15 miles out. And when they bought the property, I think the guy told me that his dad saw a 17-inch track out there. And 2 days ago when I was buying hay, this guy that is a son-in-law of this man ended up saying that this person was missing 13 goats out there, and that they had called Fish and Wildlife, and Fish and Wildlife said it was a bear that killed these 13 goats, and this guy said that it wasn't a bear, it was Bigfoot that was doing it.
Did they say how
And
the goats
he
were
said,
killed?
Said that they were eaten, is what they said. 13 goats were eaten. I don't know if they sounded like they found some parts of it. I don't know.
Now, did you tell me you had one that was killed also?
Oh yeah. I have 15 goats, 16 goats, but one's my big prize buck. He's a big, strong goat, and he's very protective of the herd. And he just vanished the other day. Just flat disappeared.
Wow.
No sign of a struggle or anything. It's just like one grabbed him and broke his neck and threw him over the shoulder, and off went a 250-pound goat.
Wow, that's
He
incredible.
was a beauty too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm expecting, others. I'm trying to get them off the market before they get eaten. And I find in my my chicken pens open. And so I put my game cam out there, and nothing would happen except for one chicken pen door was open because the game cam isn't pointing that direction. They kind of reached around and opened the door over the fence and opened it. And these aren't gates that open easily. They, I didn't go up and leave them open. I found them open like 3 or 4 times, and I know I didn't leave that gate open.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been watching this gate, and I have 3 different pens of chickens, and only about 30 head of chicken, but, when they're out running around loose, then they can be snatched.
Right.
So a lot of times they won't come back in at night. They'll just roost up on top of the pen. I have the pens covered with wires so the hawks won't get in and get the younger ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's been some crazy stuff. And after my billy goat turned up missing, my other goats acted real spooky. There's a dry creek that goes through my property, and I got it opened up for a fire break in there. I cut all the trees out, and a couple of my different goats that are, really sharp, they were watching back there. They were afraid to go back anywhere near that area. They were really spooky. And I really pay attention to my goats because, they're kind of friends with me. I feed them cookies, and they come up and eat them out of my hand all the time. And, I milk them and such. Yeah, a lot of these goats have been born here, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And, boy. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, you were telling me a lot of interesting things that were going on there.
Well, I saw something on a YouTube site where a guy not too long ago, it seemed like he was just hiking down a trail, and something hit him in the back and knocked him to the ground so hard that this guy's eye socket was broke, his face, his nose, his teeth. It looked like he had been hit by a truck, and this was just something hit him in the back, and when he hit the ground so hard, it just broke his face all to pieces. It looked terrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go on, that people either dismiss or they, put onto something else. Like you mentioned, they blamed a bear on some of these things that are going on, and it really isn't. And especially some of the sign, like the scat you mentioned. There's just pretty much black bear in that area. Like I said, I've taken a lot of pictures of bear tracks in southern Washington over the years, and the scat especially is not, black bear scat's only about an inch thick and a few inches long typically. Even grizzly bear scat isn't that big, it's a couple inches tops. Sasquatch scat, when you're talking Coke can size in terms of thickness or larger and the quantity, that really distinguishes it from, just any bear
a
scat
regular
that's
black
around.
bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And there are bear up here.
Oh, there's
I
lots
saw
of bear.
one time. Yeah, and it was just a small one standing up the road. It wasn't very big, but they've killed a few around here. But, a 300-pound black bear around here is a pretty good-sized bear.
Right, yeah, they're not
But,
overly big.
like you said, this scat was way, way, way big. It was incredibly big. I was shocked at how big it was, but, not knowing at that time, I just blew it off as a bear.
Yeah, and I think most people do that because what else could it be in their minds, right?
Exactly. You wouldn't think, Sasquatch would come in, but I think they've been coming in. Now, there's another thing that they've been doing. This sounds crazy, but my roosters, I think they're hitting my roosters with infrasound because at like 2 o'clock in the morning or 1:30 in the morning, my rooster will start crowing. Mm-hmm. And it would just go 15 times in a row. And I'm listening to those recordings over and over, and I'll hear a knock. And then the rooster go, and hear knock, knock, knock. And the darn thing is taking and hitting a stick or something against the board out there on my chicken pen and causing the darn rooster to crow over and over and over. Now, I've got this on recording, and, that was more convincing to my neighbor lady down here that I had a Bigfoot up here or something going on. She won't admit it. But I did call another neighbor. Huh?
I was going to say, I'd be interested in hearing that recording sometime.
Yeah. I'll try to figure out if I can send them to you. But, I have to listen with earphones because I'm just setting my cell phone up in the window, but it's really recording a lot of things. But, yeah, I'll see if I can send that to you. And you'll be really shocked.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what you got there.
Yeah, that would be, I'll try and get some of these recordings sent to you. I have one recording where they've done it to the roosters a couple of different times during the night. And you can tell that it's not morning because there's no other birds, when the roosters start crowing in the morning, mm-hmm. There's all kinds of other little Tweety birds and stuff around in the background making noise when it's getting daylight and the roosters start crowing, but sometimes the roosters will naturally start crowing 3:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. But this is like 1:30, 2 o'clock when they're crowing, and it's weird.
Kind of an unusual time.
Yeah, and sometimes I get knocks up to like 10 or 15 knocks in 1 minute of recording.
Have they been approaching your house?
I think they are. I mean, that's why I said I thought I heard walking in the gravel out here. But since I started pouring the urine, now I'm thinking about going out here and cutting down a lot of the favorite juniper trees that they like to be around and hide behind. And I thought if I cut them down, that would discourage them. There's none of their favorite trees to come around. I have a juniper tree out back that's, it's probably only about 15, 18-foot tree. It's only about 5 or 6 inches. Mm-hmm. But they reached up to about 7 feet and broke the top and bent it over to the ground. And just a regular tree break. And then I saw another small tree that was, like that, 5 inches, but it was an oak. And up about 7 foot, here's a 1-inch branch just busted right off next to the tree. And I got to looking around at my other trees, and I see breaks here and there and all around. But the ground is so hard, it's difficult to see a track. But since he come out and did that stomping and tore the ground up, I didn't think he had been back. But yesterday I found 2 new tracks right under that same tree.
Anything you see like that, take pictures of it. Kind of will keep a track of what's going on there.
I do, and I have a notebook that I have these nights of these recordings in it that I mark down what time it is and how many knocks I hear and breaks and thumps. And, you know, some are bigger trees, some are smaller trees, because the smaller trees make a louder, sharper sound. Bigger trees, you know, makes a duller sound. And some sounds we hear, we can hear one here and then one off in the distance knocking back and forth to each other.
Let me ask you, do you keep any food for the animals around where it can be accessed by these things?
Not where it's accessed. I keep it in a shed. And I just keep, you know, corn and chicken feed and that type of stuff.
Nothing's been disturbed.
Yeah, I've got a big garden, and I've got 2 apple trees that have apples on them, and they haven't bothered any of that, and that has surprised me.
At least yet,
But
anyway.
I've got a garden. Yeah, I've got a garden that's 30 by 60, and I've got an 8-foot deer fence around it. But the Sasquatch could just rip that down like nothing.
Sure.
But I'm thinking on running a big, powerful shop light out there during the night. We run a generator to get the freezer cold now and then. And we'll run the generator later at night instead of normal, you know, during the day. We'll run it, you know, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and have that area lit up as much as we can from now on.
Yeah, things like that will definitely keep them discouraged anyway.
Yeah, you know, I don't. Do you have any suggestions about trying to keep them further back, or?
Well, mainly things. I mean, unpredictability on your part will definitely throw them off. I mean, obviously, there's reasons they're coming in there, and usually it's food related. Cutting back the brush, like I mentioned, that's a great thing because they'll use those as an avenue of approach, and they don't like coming across that open area if possible. So, you know, keeping that area open is a good thing. The air horn, you know, has these little, you know, compressed cans of air that have them, you know, take them like to sporting events. That's a great thing, and one of my sources told me to use that. You don't want to shoot at them if possible because that can have some real negative repercussions. But like what you're doing, you know, and it sounds gross to people, but, you know, putting your urine out there is a good thing because that's marking your territory as your territory. And that's one thing that does work in places. We've had it work a number of times around the country. So, you know, taking control of your territory and letting them know, hey, this is my place. That's always a good thing. Your presence in the area, them thinking there are more people around than actually are is a good thing. You know, going out when you're out there talking out loud like you're talking to other people. Putting the lights out, motion sensor. You know, like you talked about, putting a floodlight out there. I wouldn't maybe, you know, say leaving it on, but if you hear something, you'll be able to switch it on from in the house. You know, just kind of putting them on notice that you're aware of what's going on, and that you're basically taking care of your territory.
I know that Harbor Freight sells some floodlights that are solar, and you can just mount them, and they're motion sensitive. They will come on when they sense a motion. But I had game camera out here pointed right at that tree, and I went out there and I thought, oh boy, you know, I just put that game camera up in that location, and I thought, man, I'm gonna, you know, when I saw it that night in there, I thought, man, I probably got this guy in that game camera. I went over there to that tree, and the game camera had 3 pictures that were blank at that tree, and then it was moved. It was moved off to the side. They had come in and moved it, and then they walked out there and did what they wanted.
They're smart.
So I didn't catch it. Yeah. They're just, boy. I've heard of them moving sensor lights and things like that, and I don't know, I might put them up on a pole, something where they just can't come in and get them.
Put them up a little higher, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to have to try to do things to catch them off guard, you know. And I think if I cut some of these trees in that they like, I think that's going to tick them off, and I think they won't like that at all. And I was afraid after this one scratched those tracks in the ground, and I made a cast of them, I thought it was going to come back and really retaliate, but it didn't. It's kind of stayed back. But, you know, I did start pouring urine, and I found a main trail where they're coming in, and I poured a half a gallon of urine right there, on that trail.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, yeah, and I'd already poured some down there. I did that once with a bear about 7 years ago. I had a bear come in around my goats a couple of nights, and I poured urine all around there, and he left.
And, you know, again, it may sound funny to people, but that's exactly the kind of thing that works. I mean, animals do it in their own environment with each other, so there's no reason to think it wouldn't work. And, of course, we know it does work.
Yeah. And you know, you have to talk their language. And speaking about that, sometimes I hear them talking out here, you know, and it's just kind of a low type thing. And it's in a distance. You can tell there's a couple of them over there talking, and I wonder if my other neighbors are hearing anything. I told some of my neighbors that I communicate with, there's some undesirables up here. But,
some undesirables, that's a good way to term it.
So, but, you know, this is an area off-grid. There's only there's probably about 25 parcels up here, 5 to 10 acres.
Yeah.
And only about 5 or 6 of them are occupied full time. And the one guy I've talked to, he says, I hear my dogs, and they'll be barking, they'll be looking uphill, and then they'll be barking, they'll be looking across the hill, and then they'll be barking, they'll look downhill. Next thing you know, your dogs are off barking and carrying on, and they hear your dogs bark, and they bark, and you know, and he says, they're coming down from above my house, and they're coming down past my house down to your house. So I don't know what they're getting for food down here besides maybe a chicken or a goat. I haven't missed anything out of my garden or anything. They don't seem to be affecting it. And there's, you know, nice squash and tomatoes and sunflowers and stuff out there that they could, you know, be getting into. There's corn out there.
A lot of deer in the area, right?
There's some, yeah. After we had a hard winter 2 years ago, and it whittled them down, but yeah. And I saw deer acting really funny last night. We heard something, sounded like it might have caught a deer in a fence or something and nabbed it.
Yeah, that's going to be one of their primary food sources.
Just a deer?
Yeah.
Yep. A deer and a goat are almost exactly the same. They both browse. They both eat the same thing. They're gobbling up acorn.
Sure.
But there's lots of acorns up here. There's a lot of, you know, Oregon white oak up here. And a few pine and juniper. I don't know what it is about the juniper, but they seem to like being around juniper trees.
You know, that's been something people have kind of ignored, but all the way back into the 50s, you know, when Ivan Sanderson was talking about, you know, the abominable snowman, it was sort of the same thing. They sort of prefer juniper. So there must be some kind of a property about juniper that they prefer.
Yeah. This thing here has like an 1.5 inch juniper branch that is maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet long, sticking out of the tree. And man, the last 3 inches of that thing is just shredded to pieces. They broke it off and just fighting with it. And that's what he was doing. He was fighting with this tree, trying to tear this branch off when I caught him in the light. Boy, he did not like that.
Hey, have you taken pictures of juniper where you twisted that?
Oh, yeah. I think I sent them to you.
Okay, I'll have to look. I'll have to make sure.
Yeah.
That's important because they're marking that area also.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do, and I'm thinking about just going through and, you know, my junipers are kind of spotty. There'll be half a dozen over here and a couple over there and stuff, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to just go through and cut all these out of here.
Yeah, if they're
cut them right to the
marking,
ground. And,
yeah, if they're marking that as a territorial marking, you're cutting them down. They'll definitely say, "Hey, no, this is mine. It's not yours."
yep, I'm going to cut it right to the ground flat and put the branches over in a pile away from there and bring the wood up here and
Yeah, that
use it for firewood.
might help to back them off a little bit more.
Yeah, I plan to get out there and do that. That's another thing. What about using electric fence?
I've never really heard anything either way. I would say it probably wouldn't hurt.
I just didn't know, because if they touch it, it might shock them, but
Yeah,
I don't know if they've found it out.
It probably will, but I mean, if they don't touch it, they're just gonna go over it or around it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been studying these things for quite a while, and I actually was going through a divorce a couple of years ago, and so I poured myself into all the BFRO reports in the state of Washington, and every one of them I marked on a map, and some of them I marked the dates when the sightings were.
One of the problem with their reports is if a report doesn't fit their beliefs, they won't post it or they'll change it.
Exactly, I've heard that about them.
I have some people in southern Washington I will get you in touch with that work with me, so maybe that'll be a help for you.
Yeah. I've been once they started coming out on these cell phones with this unlimited data, I've been able to listen to reports, a lot of reports every day. I've been listening to a lot of different investigators. Some are quite a bit better than others, and I come to you because I know what you do. You help people.
And I'm pretty familiar with that area too, so.
Yeah, were you raised up here around Stevenson?
No, actually, I'm from the Puyallup area, and I lived in Vancouver for about a dozen years. Of course, I'm in Northern California currently, but I did a lot of. I can't even tell you how much field work in that area. Mostly, Skamania County in that area, but I also did a fair amount of work over, south of Mount Adams in your direction.
Well, that's kind of, where, what is that, Horse Haven right in there?
Indian Heaven, yeah.
Yeah, Indian Haven, and where the berry fields are,
right.
And then over towards Skookum Meadows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I've been kind of doing some investigative work. I put a game cam up down there for a week and went back, and I got some nice picture of elk and things, but just before we stopped to pick up the game camera, and I had it hid back around the side of a tree. Well, I got it home and got to looking at the pictures, and it looks like there's a couple of figures over behind a tree looking at me, and one has this snout like a dog, and it just looks scary as can be, because a lot of the things that I see over in that area look like dogmen, and that just...
Well, let me tell you, there isn't, number one, no such thing as a dogman. It's a different type of Sasquatch.
Okay, that's a type 3 then? The
type 3, correct. And it's unusual that they're in that part of the country. That's why I'd be interested in seeing that picture, because I want to show it to my contact, Mr. Black.
Okay. Yeah. Just
yeah, it's not out of the question, but they're more over the Mississippi River region, but it's not out of the question that they're not out west also.
Yeah, the first reports I heard of them over there, and then I heard Wes talk about hearing 2 different reports in Oregon within a couple of months, and that was about a year ago that he said that.
Yeah, well, I don't have much to say about that guy.
Yeah, he's kind of, I don't know, we went to the conference here this year and at Kennewick, and he had a site there. He had a grill there for a little while, but most of the time nobody was at his table.
Yeah.
It was just empty. Nothing there, nobody to talk. Only one guy there actually had casts, and they were cast out of the Blue Mountains that his grandfather had done. He really didn't have any cast of his own, but he had some really impressive handprints. They were huge.
Interesting.
Really, really impressive. But he's kind of BFRO over there, and you know, I asked him what he thought, and he said, "I'd move."
Well, I wouldn't recommend moving, but you know, because there are definitely some concrete methods, and you're already well underway of you know, taking control of your territory, and that's really, you know, with these things, they're primates, and that's what you have to do. You have to establish your territory when they're trying to come in and establish theirs, because it's yours, it belongs to you, and you just need to let them know that.
That's what we're doing. We're just trying to make it as unpleasant for them as we can.
That's good. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Mike?
Not that I can think of at this point. I'll text you if I come up with anything else. I'll send you a few more pictures.
Okay, and like I said, I've got a couple of guys that I've worked with for some time. They're a couple of my researchers. One's in Washougal, the other one's in Kelso. And I will definitely get them in touch with you and get you some help in that area.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mike, it was a pleasure talking. Keep in touch. And, you know, I'm going to be getting up in that area next summer. So we'll get a chance to meet and kind of go over what's going on up there.
Okay. That sounds great.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, I appreciate you talking to me, and keep in touch.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you. See you later.
All right. Take it easy now.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.